One second, you feel safe. And then,
The police are on their way.
well, you still do.
The coffee maker gurgled to life at 5:47 a.m., same as it had every morning for the past 15 years. I stood there in my boxers and yesterday's work shirt, watching the dark liquid drip into the pot, wondering when the hell everything had started feeling so mechanical. The kitchen still smelled like yesterday's burnt toast and Sarah's expensive vanilla candles, but something was different. Something had shifted overnight, like a gear slipping in an engine you thought you knew by heart. Sarah appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her crisp white blouse and navy skirt. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that severe bun she'd started wearing to work, the one that made her look like she was perpetually disappointed in everyone around her. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "I no longer feel drawn to you." Just like that. No good morning, no preamble, no warning. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a bad exhaust pipe. I turned to face her, coffee mug halfway to my lips, and studied her face. 39 years old, still beautiful in that polished, artificial way she'd cultivated since her promotion to marketing director. But her eyes were cold, distant, like she was looking through me rather than at me. "I understand," I replied, setting the mug down on the counter with a soft clink. And I did understand. Hell, maybe I'd been waiting for this moment longer than I cared to admit. The Sarah standing in my kitchen wasn't the same woman I'd married 16 years ago. That Sarah had laughed at my jokes, had curled up next to me on the couch to watch old movies, had actually seemed to enjoy my company. This Sarah looked at me like I was a piece of furniture she was considering replacing. "That's it?" she asked, and for just a second, I caught something in her voice. Surprise, maybe, or disappointment that I wasn't going to make this harder for her. "What do you want me to say, Sarah? You want me to beg? You want me to promise I'll change, become someone I'm not?" I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "You've made your decision. I respect that." She blinked, clearly not expecting this reaction. I thought you should know where I stand." "Where we both stand," I corrected. "Because honestly, sweetheart, the feeling's been mutual for a while now." That hit her. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened, the way her perfectly manicured fingers clenched around her purse strap. Sarah had always needed to be wanted, needed to be the center of attention. The idea that I might not be devastated by her rejection was clearly not part of her script. She left without another word, her heels clicking across the hardwood floor like bullets hitting concrete. I heard her car start in the driveway, listened to the sound fade as she drove toward her office downtown. Then I was alone with the coffee maker's dying gurgles and the sudden, overwhelming silence of a house that had just become a tomb. By the next day, the small things were gone. No more shared coffee in the morning. I made my own, drank it black, and found I actually preferred the bitter taste. No more bedtime rituals. Sarah had moved into the guest room, claiming she needed space to think. No more plans for the future. The vacation brochures she'd left scattered on the kitchen table disappeared, along with the calendar where she used to mark important dates in her neat, precise handwriting. But the absence of those small intimacies was nothing compared to what I noticed missing from Sarah herself. The way she used to hum while doing dishes, the little laugh she'd make when I told her about the idiots who came into my auto parts store, the way she used to steal French fries off my plate when we went to Murphy's Diner on Friday nights. All of it. Gone. Like someone had taken an eraser to our marriage and rubbed out everything that had once made it real. I kept my mouth shut and went about my business. Opened the store at 7 sharp, same as always. Helped customers find the right spark plugs and air filters, listened to their complaints about their mechanics, their wives, their lives. My employees, Tommy, a kid fresh out of high school, and Pete, who'd been working on cars since before I was born, kept giving me sideways looks, but they didn't ask questions. In a town like Millfield, everyone knew everyone else's business, but there was still an unspoken rule about not poking at fresh wounds. It was Pete who finally broke the silence on Thursday afternoon. We were closing up, counting the till, when he cleared his throat and said, "You doing okay, boss? You've been quieter than usual this week." "Just tired," I lied, shoving 20s into the deposit bag. "Sarah and I are working through some things." Pete nodded like he understood, but I caught the look he exchanged with Tommy. They knew something was up. Hell, the whole town probably knew by now. Sarah had never been particularly discreet about her feelings, and I doubted she was starting now. The confirmation came Friday night at Murphy's Diner. I'd gone alone, ordered my usual burger and fries, and was trying to read the sports section when Diane Murphy herself slid into the booth across from me. Diane had owned the diner with her husband for 30 years, and she knew more about the private lives of Millfield residents than the FBI. "Where's Sarah tonight?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Home," I said, not looking up from the paper. "Mm-hmm." Diane folded her hands on the table. "You know, she was in here Tuesday night, with that personal trainer from the gym, Jake something, young guy, lots of muscles, drives that ridiculous yellow Camaro." My hand stilled on the newspaper. "Is that so?" They seemed friendly. I looked up then, met Diane's knowing eyes. She wasn't being malicious. Diane had always liked me, had always treated Sarah with polite but obvious skepticism. She was giving me information, the way you'd warn a friend about black ice on the road ahead. "Thanks for letting me know," I said quietly. She patted my hand and slid out of the booth. "You're a good man, David. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I finished my burger, paid my check, and drove home through the empty streets of Millfield. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Sarah's car wasn't there. According to the clock on my dashboard, it was 9:30 p.m. On a Friday night, my wife was somewhere else, with someone else, doing things I didn't want to think about. I sat in my truck for a long time, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at the dark windows of what used to be our home. 15 years I'd been making payments on this house. 15 years of mowing the lawn, fixing the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, painting the shutters every few summers. 15 years of building a life with someone who no longer felt drawn to me. But soon, Sarah would notice that something had disappeared, something she feared losing more than anything else. Her security. Saturday morning brought rain and the kind of gray sky that made everything look washed out and tired. I was at Kroger, grabbing coffee and the basics I'd need now that Sarah had apparently decided meal planning was no longer part of her wifely duties, when I literally bumped into Lisa near the frozen food section. Lisa Morrison now, though she'd kept her maiden name professionally, was Sarah's younger sister, and in many ways, everything Sarah wasn't. Where Sarah was polished and cold, Lisa was warm and genuine. Where Sarah had spent the last few years climbing the corporate ladder, Lisa taught 3rd grade and actually seemed to enjoy it. She was pushing a cart full of groceries, including what looked like ingredients for a birthday cake. "David!" She seemed genuinely happy to see me, which was more than I could say for most people lately. "How are you? I feel like it's been forever." "Hey, Lisa, I'm doing all right. How's the teaching going?" "Oh, you know how it is. 28 8-year-olds who think they know everything." She laughed, then her expression grew more serious. "I've been meaning to call you, actually. Is everything okay with you and Sarah? She's been different lately when we talk." I leaned against my cart, studying Lisa's face. She had the same green eyes as Sarah, but where Sarah's had grown calculating over the years, Lisa's remained open and honest. If anyone would tell me the truth about what was going on, it would be her. "Different how?" Lisa glanced around the frozen food aisle, as if checking for eavesdroppers. "She's been asking weird questions about divorce lawyers. And she's been talking about this guy from her gym, Jake something. She says he's helping her discover herself. She made air quotes, her expression skeptical. David, I have to ask, are you two having problems? The question hung between us like a challenge. I could lie, keep up appearances, pretend everything was fine. That's what the old David would have done. But the old David had also been married to a woman who actually gave a damn about him. Sarah told me she no longer feels drawn to me, I said simply. Lisa's face crumpled with sympathy and something that looked like anger. Oh, David, I'm so sorry. When did this happen? Monday morning, right there in the kitchen, like she was commenting on the weather. That sounds like Sarah, Lisa muttered, then caught herself. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. She's my sister, but sometimes… She trailed off, shaking her head. Sometimes what? Lisa looked around again, then stepped closer to me. David, I think she's having an affair with that trainer, Jake. She's been talking about him constantly, and last week when I called her office, they said she'd left early for a personal training session. But when I asked her about it later, she said she'd been in meetings all afternoon. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, even though I'd already suspected as much. Hearing it confirmed, especially by Sarah's own sister, made it real in a way that Diane Murphy's careful hints hadn't. Are you sure? I'm not sure of anything anymore, Lisa said, her voice heavy with sadness. But I know my sister, and she's acting like someone who's keeping secrets. Big ones. We stood there in the fluorescent lighting of the grocery store, surrounded by the mundane sounds of shopping carts and checkout scanners, while my 15-year marriage officially died. I felt oddly calm, like a fever breaking after a long illness. Thanks for telling me, I said finally. David, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Actually, it is. I needed to know. Lisa reached out and squeezed my arm. If you need anything, someone to talk to, a place to stay, whatever, you call me, okay? Sarah might be my sister, but what she's doing isn't right. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Lisa gave me one more sympathetic look and pushed her cart toward the checkout lanes, leaving me alone with my coffee and my new reality. Jake Morrison. I knew the guy by reputation. Mid-30s, all muscles and fake tan, drove a yellow Camaro that he parked in the fire lane at the grocery store because he was too important to walk an extra 50 feet. He ran some kind of personal training business out of the gym on Maple Street, the one that catered to bored housewives and middle-aged men having midlife crises. The same gym Sarah had joined 6 months ago, claiming she needed to invest in her health. I finished my shopping and drove home, my mind racing. Sarah's car was in the driveway, which surprised me. It was barely noon on a Saturday, prime time for personal training sessions, I would have thought. She was in the living room when I walked in, laptop open, papers scattered across the coffee table. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at being interrupted. Where have you been? She asked. Grocery store. Someone has to keep food in the house. She flinched at that, but didn't respond. I set the bags on the kitchen counter and started putting things away, listening to the sound of her typing in the next room. Normal domestic sounds that felt anything but normal now. Sarah, I called out, keeping my voice casual. How's your personal training going? You've been doing that for what, 6 months now? The typing stopped. It's fine, she said after a pause. Why? Just curious. You've been spending a lot of time at the gym lately. Must be working with a really dedicated trainer. Silence from the living room. I could practically hear her thinking, trying to figure out how much I knew. His name is Jake, she said finally. He's very professional. I'm sure he is. I finished putting away the groceries and walked back into the living room. Sarah was staring at her laptop screen, but I could tell she wasn't actually reading anything. Her jaw was tight, her shoulders tense. Sarah, we need to talk. About what? About Jake Morrison. about where you really go when you leave the house, about what's really going on here. She looked up then, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not guilt or shame, but defiance. Like she was daring me to call her out, to make her admit what we both knew was true. "I don't know what you're implying," she said carefully. "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Are you having an affair?" The question hung in the air between us. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. Then her expression hardened, and she closed her laptop with a sharp snap. "I don't have to listen to this," she said, standing up. "I'm going out." "Where?" "That's none of your business anymore, is it? You said you understood when I told you how I felt. Well, this is what understanding looks like, David. This is what happens when a marriage dies." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I didn't try to stop her. What would have been the point? But as I watched her car back out of the driveway, I was already planning my next move. Sarah wanted to play games? Fine. I'd spent 15 years learning how to fix things that were broken. Time to find out if I was any good at breaking things that needed to be destroyed. Monday morning, I made 2 phone calls before I even opened the store. The first was to Millfield National Bank, where I'd done business for 20 years. The second was to Verizon, where we'd had our family plan for the last decade. Both conversations were brief, professional, and absolutely devastating to someone who'd grown accustomed to living off someone else's hard work. By 9 a.m., Sarah Morrison no longer had access to our joint checking account, our joint savings account, or our joint credit cards. By 9:15, her cell phone service had been suspended. By 9:30, I was opening up David's auto parts with a clear conscience and something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. Tommy was already there when I arrived, sorting through a shipment of oil filters that had come in over the weekend. The kid was reliable, I'd give him that. Showed up on time, did his work, didn't ask too many personal questions. Unlike Pete, who took one look at my face and immediately started grinning. "You look like a man who just won the lottery," Pete said, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "What's got you so cheerful this morning?" "Just enjoying the beautiful day," I replied, but I couldn't keep the smile off my face. The beautiful day got even better around 11:30 when my cell phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, and I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Sarah." "David, what the hell did you do?" Her voice was tight with panic and fury. "My card was declined at Starbucks. The bank says I don't have access to our accounts, and my phone keeps saying my service is suspended." "That's strange," I said, leaning back in my desk chair. "Maybe you should call customer service." "Don't play games with me. I know you did this." "Did what? Exercised my legal right to manage accounts that are in my name? Canceled services that I pay for? I'm not sure what you're upset about, sweetheart." The endearment came out dripping with sarcasm, and I heard her sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "You can't do this to me," she said. "I have expenses. I have responsibilities. So do I. And one of my responsibilities is making sure my hard-earned money goes toward things I actually value. David, please. We can work this out. We can talk about this like adults." "We could have talked about it like adults before you started screwing your personal trainer. But apparently, you preferred a different kind of communication." Silence on the other end. I could hear traffic in the background, the distant sound of car horns. She was calling from somewhere downtown, probably standing outside whatever coffee shop had just humiliated her by declining her card. "I don't know what you think you know," she said finally. "I know enough. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I'm coming home. We're going to discuss this." "Actually, no, we're not. I'm at work. You know, that place where I go every day to earn the money you've been spending on your boyfriend? I'll be here until 6. After that, I'll be at Murphy's having dinner. Alone." I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone to silent. Tommy was pretending to organize inventory nearby, but I could tell he'd been listening to every word. Pete wasn't even bothering to pretend. He was standing in the doorway, grinning like a fool. "Damn, boss," Pete said. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." The afternoon passed quietly. A few regular customers came in looking for parts, and I helped them with the same professional courtesy I'd always shown. But underneath the normal routine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: control. For the first time in I couldn't remember how long, I was the one making decisions about my own life. At 5:45, I was getting ready to close up when Jake Morrison's yellow Camaro pulled into the parking lot. He climbed out of the car like he was stepping onto a movie set, all swagger and artificial confidence. Jake was the kind of guy who wore tank tops in October and probably flexed in every mirror he passed. He had the build of someone who spent more time looking at himself than actually working, and the kind of fake tan that came from a bottle rather than honest labor. The bell above the door chimed as he walked in, and I looked up from the register with my best customer service smile. "Help you find something?" "Yeah, you can help me." He planted himself in front of the counter, crossing his arms to show off his biceps. "You can stop harassing my girlfriend." "Your girlfriend?" I raised an eyebrows. "I'm sorry. I think you might have me confused with someone else. I don't know anyone who'd be desperate enough to date you." His face flushed red above his carefully groomed beard. "Don't play dumb with me, old man. Sarah told me what you did today, cutting off her money, her phone. That's abuse, you know that?" "Sarah Morrison?" I pretended to think about it. "Oh, you mean my wife, the woman I've been married to for 15 years, who lives in my house and drives a car that's registered in my name." I leaned forward across the counter. "That's Sarah? She doesn't want to be married to you anymore. She's moving on with her life." "Is she now? Well, that's interesting because last time I checked, we're still legally married, which means what's mine is hers and what's hers is mine. But here's the thing, Jake. I'm the only one in this marriage who actually owns anything." He took a step closer to the counter, trying to intimidate me. "You think you're real smart, don't you? Smarter than a guy who thinks he can walk into another man's business and make demands about that man's wife. She's not your wife anymore. She's with me now. Then I guess you better start paying her bills." That hit home. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands clenched into fists. Jake Morrison might have been all muscle and attitude, but he clearly wasn't all money, which explained a lot about his sudden interest in a married woman with access to a comfortable bank account. "This isn't over," he said, backing toward the door. "You're right about that," I replied. "It's just getting started." He left without another word, his Camaro's engine roaring as he peeled out of the parking lot. Tommy and Pete, who had been watching the whole exchange from the back of the store, came up to the counter shaking their heads. "What a piece of work," Tommy muttered. "They always are," Pete said. "Guys like that, they're all flash and no substance. Sarah's gonna figure that out real quick now that the money's dried up." I locked up the store and drove to Murphy's, where Diane had my usual table waiting. The diner was busy for a Monday night, families grabbing a quick dinner, teenagers sharing fries and gossip, the usual collection of regulars who treated Murphy's like their personal social club. I was halfway through my burger when Sarah walked in. She looked terrible. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd had on that morning. She spotted me immediately and marched over to my table, her heels clicking angrily on the linoleum floor. "We need to talk," she said, sliding into the booth across from me without being invited. "I'm eating. David, please. This has gone far enough." I looked up from my plate, studying her face. The polished, professional mask she usually wore was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate. For the first time in months, she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable, human, real. "Has it?" I asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like it's just getting started. I made a mistake, okay? I can admit that. But cutting me off completely isn't the answer. We can work through this." "Can we?" Because this morning you told me it was none of my business where you went or what you did. Now suddenly you want to work through things? She glanced around the diner, aware that people were watching us. Diane Murphy was pretending to wipe down the counter, but I could see her listening to every word. "Not here," Sarah said quietly. "Can we please go home and talk about this privately?" "This is private enough for me. Besides, I'm comfortable here." Her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? You're enjoying humiliating me." "I'm enjoying my dinner. The humiliation is something you brought on yourself." She leaned forward across the table, lowering her voice. "David, I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes. But this isn't the way to handle it. What would you suggest? Should I pretend I don't know about Jake? Should I keep paying your bills while you figure out whether you want to be married to me or not?" I ended it with Jake. The words hung between us like a lie we both recognized. I set down my fork and looked at her directly. "When?" "This afternoon. After what happened with the accounts." "So you ended it because I cut off your money, not because you realized you were destroying our marriage." She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I stood up, pulling a 20 from my wallet and dropping it on the table. "Sarah, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I spent 15 years loving a woman who apparently never existed. I'm not going to spend another 15 years being manipulated by the woman who took her place." "What does that mean?" "It means you made your choice. Now you get to live with it." I walked out of Murphy's diner, leaving my wife sitting alone in a booth, surrounded by the curious stares of half the town. As I climbed into my truck, I could see her through the window, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. For just a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Tuesday night, I was in my garage working on a carburetor rebuild when I smelled smoke. At first, I thought it might be coming from the Hendersons' backyard. They were always burning leaves or trash, despite the city ordinances against it. But this smoke was different, thicker, more acrid. It smelled like burning plastic and motor oil. It smelled like my livelihood going up in flames. I dropped the carburetor and ran outside, and that's when I saw the orange glow coming from downtown, from the direction of my store. I was in my truck and racing through the empty streets before I'd fully processed what I was seeing, my heart hammering against my ribs like a piston with a broken rod. David's Auto Parts was a blazing inferno by the time I got there. The fire department was already on scene, their hoses trained on the building. But it was too late. 23 years of my life, everything I'd built from nothing, was being consumed by flames that reached into the night sky like the fingers of some hungry demon. I parked across the street and stood there watching it burn, surrounded by half the town. Neighbors, customers, people I'd known for decades, all of them drawn by the terrible fascination of destruction. Someone, I think it was Mrs. Patterson from the bakery, put a hand on my shoulder and said something about insurance, about rebuilding, about how sorry she was. But her words sounded like they were coming from underwater. Chief Bradley found me around midnight, after the flames had been knocked down and all that remained was a smoking, water-soaked skeleton of what used to be my store. He was a good man, someone I'd gone to high school with, and I could see the genuine sympathy in his eyes when he approached. "David, I'm sorry as hell about this," he said. "We got the call around 10:30. Neighbors saw flames in the back of the building." "Any idea how it started?" "Too early to tell for sure. The fire marshal will be out tomorrow to investigate. But David..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I have to ask, is there anyone who might have wanted to do this? Anyone you've had problems with lately?" I thought about Jake Morrison, about his threat that afternoon, about Sarah's desperation when her money got cut off, about how quickly a person's life could change when they stopped playing by the rules. "I might have some ideas," I said. "We'll need to talk about that, but not tonight. Tonight you should go home, get some rest. There's nothing more you can do here. But I couldn't go home. Not yet. I stood there until dawn, watching the smoke rise from the ruins of everything I'd worked for, thinking about betrayal and consequences and the strange, cold satisfaction of watching the world burn when you've got nothing left to lose. The fire marshal's investigation took 3 days. 3 days of sifting through ash and debris, of interviews and insurance forms, and the slow, grinding machinery of official business. 3 days of Sarah calling my cell phone every few hours, her messages growing increasingly frantic as she realized the full scope of what had happened. David, I heard about the store. I'm so sorry. Please call me back. David, we need to talk. This changes everything. David, I know you think I had something to do with this, but you're wrong. Please, just call me. I didn't call her back. I had nothing to say to her that wouldn't be better said through lawyers. The fire marshal's report came back on Friday. Arson. Definitely. Accelerant poured around the back of the building, near the storage area where I kept motor oil and other flammable materials. Someone who knew the layout of the store, who understood how to make the fire spread quickly and burn hot enough to destroy everything. Someone like a wife who'd helped me inventory supplies for 15 years. Or someone like her boyfriend, who might have been desperate enough to remove the source of her husband's power over her. Detective Ray Kowalski caught the case. I'd known Ray since we were kids. He'd been a year ahead of me in school, had played football while I ran track. He was a good cop, thorough and fair, with the kind of cynical humor that came from 20 years of dealing with the worst of human nature. David, I'm going to be straight with you, he said when we met at the police station Saturday morning. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. Whoever did this knew your store, knew how to make it burn fast and hot. They wanted to destroy everything, not just damage it. Any suspects? A few. But I need to ask you some questions first, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Where were you Tuesday night between 9 and 11 p.m.? At home. Working in my garage. Anyone who can verify that? No, I was alone. Ray made a note on his pad. What about your wife? Where was she? I don't know. We're separated. She's been staying somewhere else. Somewhere else like where? I met his eyes. Like with her boyfriend, Jake Morrison, the personal trainer from the gym on Maple Street. Ray's eyebrows went up. You want to tell me about that? So I did. I told him about Sarah's announcement, about discovering the affair, about cutting off her access to money. I told him about Jake's visit to my store, about his threats, about the desperation I'd seen in both of them when they realized their meal ticket had been canceled. Interesting, Ray said when I finished. Because Jake Morrison filed a complaint against you Wednesday morning, says you've been harassing him, threatening him, says he's afraid for his safety. Is that so? Yeah. And your wife, she came in Thursday, filed a complaint too, says you've been financially abusive, that you've threatened her, that she's afraid of what you might do next. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. They're trying to set me up. Maybe. Or maybe they're just trying to cover their tracks after doing something stupid. Ray leaned back in his chair. Here's what I know for sure, David. Your store was torched by someone who knew what they were doing, someone who had access, who understood the layout, and the only people with that kind of knowledge are you, your employees, and your wife. You think I burned down my own store? I think you're a man who just lost everything he worked for, and sometimes people in that situation do desperate things. But I also think you're too smart to pour gasoline around your own building and light a match. Which brings us back to your wife and her boyfriend. What do you need from me? Phone records, for starters. Both yours and theirs. Financial records showing when you cut off her access. Any documentation of threats, harassment, anything that might give us a motive. Ray stood up, extending his hand. David, I'm sorry about your store, but if someone did this to hurt you, I'm going to find them. That's a promise. I shook his hand and left the police station with something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not hope that I could rebuild what I'd lost. That would take years, if it was even possible. But hope that the people who destroyed my life would finally face some consequences for their actions. That hope lasted exactly 4 hours. I was at home, going through insurance paperwork, when Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. She sat there for several minutes before getting out, and when she finally approached the front door, she looked like someone who'd been crying for days. I let her ring the doorbell 3 times before I answered. "What do you want, Sarah?" "To talk. Please, David, just give me 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She stood in the entryway of what used to be our home, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time, or maybe for the last time. "I heard about what you told the police," she said finally. "Did you? That's interesting. How would you hear about an ongoing investigation?" "Jake told me. They questioned him yesterday." "I bet they did." She turned to face me, and I was shocked by how haggard she looked. The polished professional woman who'd announced she was no longer drawn to me had been replaced by someone who looked desperate and frightened. "David, I swear to you, neither of us had anything to do with the fire. Yes, I was angry about the money. Yes, Jake was upset about what you said to him. But I would never do something like that." "Wouldn't you?" "No. God, David, what kind of person do you think I am?" I studied her face, looking for some sign of the woman I'd once loved. She was still there, buried under layers of guilt and fear and bad decisions, but she was there. "I think you're a person who threw away 15 years of marriage for a guy with nice abs and no money," I said. "I think you're a person who's capable of justifying almost anything when it serves your interests." "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out louder than I'd intended. "You want to talk about fair, Sarah? Was it fair when you decided to start screwing around behind my back? Was it fair when you announced you were done with our marriage like you were canceling a magazine subscription? Was it fair when someone burned down everything I've worked for? I told you I didn't. Maybe you didn't light the match, but you sure as hell provided the motive." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, her careful makeup ruined. For a moment she looked like the young woman I'd married, vulnerable and lost, and desperately in need of someone to save her. But I wasn't that someone anymore. "Get out," I said quietly. "David, please. Get out of my house, Sarah, and don't come back." She left without another word, and I watched through the window as she sat in her car for several minutes, crying into her hands. Then she started the engine and drove away, and I was alone again with the ashes of my old life. But as I stood there in the gathering darkness, I realized something had changed. The desperate, panicked feeling that had consumed me since the fire was gone, replaced by something colder and more focused. Sarah and Jake might not have lit the match, but they'd created the conditions that led to everything I'd lost. They'd pushed me to the breaking point, then acted surprised when I'd pushed back. Well, if they wanted to see what the breaking point really looked like, I was happy to show them. The game was just getting started. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on Monday morning, 3 weeks after the fire. I was in my kitchen, drinking coffee and reading insurance documents when Detective Kowalski's name flashed on my phone screen. "We got them," he said without preamble. "Both of them. Sarah's phone GPS puts her at your store at 9:43 p.m. the night of the fire. Jake's phone was there too, from 9:41 to 10:15. We also found receipts. He bought 2 gallons of gasoline at the Shell station on Route 9 that afternoon. Paid cash." I set down my coffee mug, my hand surprisingly steady. "When are you bringing them in?" "Sarah's already here. Picked her up an hour ago. Jake's next. We're heading to his apartment now." Ray paused. "David, I need you to know something. She's asking for you. Says she'll only talk if you're here. Why would she want that?" "I don't know. Maybe she wants to apologize. Maybe she wants to try to manipulate you one more time. But it's your choice. You don't have to see her if you don't want to. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The Millfield Police Department was a small brick building that looked more like a library than a law enforcement facility. I'd been there dozens of times over the years, paying parking tickets, getting permits for the store, the mundane interactions between a business owner and local government. But walking through those doors Monday morning felt different. Final. Ray met me in the lobby and led me to a small conference room. "She's in interview room 2, he said. "We can set up a monitor so you can watch, or you can go in and talk to her directly. Your call." "I'll talk to her." Sarah was sitting at a metal table, her hands folded in front of her, when I walked in. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair disheveled. She was wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, clothes I'd never seen her wear to anything more formal than yard work. The polished professional mask was completely gone now, stripped away by the reality of handcuffs and Miranda rights. "David." She looked up when I entered, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not just fear or regret, but genuine remorse. "Thank you for coming." I took the chair across from her, keeping the table between us. "Ray says you'll only talk if I'm here." "Why?" "Because I owe you the truth. All of it." She wiped her nose with a tissue that had seen better days. "And because I need you to know that burning down your store wasn't my idea." "But you were there." "Yes." The word came out as barely a whisper. "I was there." "Tell me what happened." Sarah took a shaky breath, gathering herself. "Jake called me that Tuesday night. He was furious about what you'd said to him at the store, about the money being cut off. He'd been drinking, and he was talking crazy, saying you'd humiliated him, that you needed to pay for what you'd done. So you decided to help him commit arson." "No, I went there to stop him. I knew he was going to do something stupid, and I thought maybe I could talk him out of it." "But you didn't." "By the time I got there, he'd already started. He had gasoline cans. He was pouring it around the back of the building. I begged him to stop, told him this would ruin everything, but he wouldn't listen. He said you destroyed his life, that you deserved to lose everything." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "So why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you try to stop him?" I don't know. I was scared. I was angry. Part of me thought—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Part of you thought I deserved it." "Yes." The admission seemed to cost her something. I was so angry about the money, about being cut off, about being humiliated in front of the whole town. And Jake kept saying it was your fault, that you'd forced us into this situation. "So you watched him burn down my store." I tried to leave. I got back in my car and started to drive away. But then I saw the flames, and I realized what we'd actually done, what I'd let happen. She was crying again now, tears streaming down her face. "David, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am so sorry." I sat there for a long moment, looking at the woman I'd been married to for 15 years, the woman who'd shared my bed, my dreams, my life, the woman who'd stood by and watched a man destroy everything I'd built because she was angry about losing access to my money. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." "Okay." "If Jake hadn't been arrested, if you thought you could get away with this, would you be here apologizing? Or would you be somewhere else, spending insurance money with your boyfriend?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. "I don't know," she said finally. "I want to say I would have come forward anyway, but I don't know." It was, I realized, the most honest thing she'd said to me in months. "Thank you," I said, standing up, "for telling me the truth." "David, wait, please." She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled away. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I've lost any right to ask for anything from you. But please, don't let this destroy you. Don't let what we did turn you into someone bitter and angry." I looked down at her, this woman who'd been the center of my world for so long, now reduced to a defendant in an arson case. "Sarah, you're 15 years too late to worry about what kind of man I'm going to become." I walked out of the interview room and didn't look back. Ray was waiting in the hallway, along with a woman I didn't recognize, tall, professional, with the kind of confident bearing that screamed federal prosecutor. "David, this is Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh," Ray said. "She's handling the case." "Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry for what you've been through," Walsh said, shaking my hand. "I want you to know we're going to prosecute this to the fullest extent of the law. Arson is a serious felony, especially when it involves destroying someone's livelihood." "What kind of sentence are we looking at?" "For arson in the first degree, potentially 10 to 20 years, depending on their cooperation and criminal history. Your wife has no priors, so she might get a lighter sentence if she testifies against Morrison. But he's looking at serious time. 20 years. Jake Morrison, who'd thought he was so clever, so untouchable, was looking at spending the next 2 decades in a concrete box. And Sarah, who'd thrown away our marriage for a man with nice abs and no character, was looking at becoming a convicted felon. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. "What happens now?" I asked. "Arraignment, probably tomorrow. Then we start building our case. We'll need you to testify, of course. Document the financial impact, the threats Morrison made, the timeline of events. Whatever you need." I left the police station and drove aimlessly through Millfield's quiet streets, past the diner where Sarah and I used to have Friday night dinners, past the gym where she'd met her personal trainer, past the empty lot where my store used to stand. The insurance company had already cleared the debris, leaving nothing but a patch of bare ground and a for sale sign that nobody was likely to answer. My phone rang as I was sitting in my truck, staring at that empty lot. Lisa's name flashed on the screen. "David? I just heard. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Lisa." "No, you're not. Nobody would be fine after this. Do you want some company? I could come over, make dinner, just be there." I thought about it. The idea of going home to an empty house, of spending another evening alone with my thoughts and my anger, was suddenly unbearable. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that. I'll be there in an hour." Lisa arrived with groceries and a bottle of wine, and for the first time in weeks, my house felt like a home again. She cooked while I sat at the kitchen counter, telling her about the interrogation, about Sarah's confession, about the strange emptiness I felt now that it was all over. "She's my sister," Lisa said, stirring something that smelled like heaven on the stove. "But what she did to you, David, I'm so ashamed. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, isn't it? I knew something was wrong. I knew she was changing, becoming someone I didn't recognize. Maybe if I'd said something sooner." "You did say something. You're the one who told me about Jake." Too late, though, after she'd already destroyed everything. We ate dinner at my kitchen table, talking about everything except Sarah and Jake and burning buildings. Lisa told me about her students, about the funny things 8-year-olds say, about her plans for summer vacation. Normal conversation, the kind I'd almost forgotten existed. "David," she said as we were cleaning up, "what are you going to do now? About the store, I mean." "I don't know. The insurance money will cover most of the loss, but starting over at 41, I shrugged. Maybe it's time for a change. Maybe it is. She was standing close to me now, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral that was nothing like the expensive stuff Sarah used to wear. Maybe this is your chance to build something new, something better. With you? The question hung in the air between us. Lisa looked up at me, her green eyes serious and warm and completely honest. "If you want to," she said simply. I thought about it. About Sarah, sitting in a jail cell, facing years in prison for a moment of stupidity and greed. About Jake Morrison, whose arrogance and entitlement had finally caught up with him. About the store I'd lost, the marriage that had died, the life I'd thought I wanted. And then I thought about the woman standing in front of me, who'd been nothing but kind and honest and loyal, even when it meant betraying her own sister. "I'd like that," I said. She smiled, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something other than anger or sadness or empty satisfaction. I felt hope. 6 months later, Sarah Morrison was sentenced to 5 years in state prison. Jake Morrison got 15 years, thanks to his criminal record and his complete lack of remorse. The insurance company paid out my claim in full, and I used the money to open a new business, a garage specializing in classic car restoration, something I'd always wanted to try. Lisa and I were married the following spring, in a small ceremony at her church. Sarah didn't attend, she was still serving her sentence, but she sent a letter apologizing again and wishing us well. I read it once and threw it away. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding, but some fires, I learned, clear the ground for something better to grow.